Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. Have we got a show for you this week? We have previews, we have new previews, we have reprint previews. We're here for Modern Horizons 2. And for that, we brought on the lead for Modern Horizons 2, who came down off the mount to lead this set. He was telling me beforehand, Aaron Forsythe has not let us sense new Phyrexia because he's been too busy being in charge of things. But welcome, Aaron. He's going to take us behind the scenes for Modern Horizons 2, help us preview a bunch of cards, and answer some of your questions. We'll get to the questions later in the stream, so don't start putting them in chat just yet because we're not going to be paying attention. But what we will do is we're going to do a little bit of news, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do some previews. So first, the news. Couple items this week. On sale today on Magic the Gathering Arena is Historic Anthology 5, featuring all of these cards you see here. We've got the Praetors, we've got the Commands. Yeah, speaking of new Phyrexia. Yeah, you had a hand in all of those.
I remember those guys, yeah.
A lot of interesting cards below those as well. Stifle's a really cool card that occasionally sees some legacy play. We've got Dragonstorm. We've got Ancient Grudge, Into the North. There's a lot there to look into, so check out Historic Anthology 5 on Magic Gathering Arena. And then additionally, going on right now but ending tomorrow morning, is Dr. Lair's Secretorium Super Drop. So this is the one with the full text basic lands. It's got shock lands. It's got some Strixhaven Mystical Archive style cards. It's got the funky looking gamble over there on the right. So you've got until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning to order Dr. Lair's Secretorium Super Drop. But that's not what you're here for. You're interested, but that's not what you're here for. What you're here for is to hear Aaron Forsythe tell you all about a bunch of new cards, and I saw it in chat. People are asking for white cards, and we are going to bring you white cards today. We have a bunch of white cards. We got some white cards. We've got some non-white cards as well, but actually both of our new previews are white. We got a rare and a mythic. We got some white and multi-white in them in the reprint section. So we're going to talk about a bunch of these cards. Let's not waste any time. Let's pull up the first card, which is Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel is a single white mana for a 1/1 artifact creature human soldier. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. All right, Aaron, tell us the story behind this card.
We are constantly looking for ways to figure out how to give white some card draw. Generally, we've been happiest with the designs that kind of let it draw one extra card per turn, as opposed to a large number of cards per turn. Taxing, obviously something that white does really well in Eternal formats, Modern, Legacy, and Commander. And we made this guy an artifact human just to kind of maximize all the possible synergies with human cards in Modern, a lot of artifact synergies we have in Limited, like with modular. There's +1/+1 counter themes. There's affinity and metalcraft themes. So if you make this guy bigger, it's harder for your opponent to pay the tax, so you can draw the cards easier. So a lot of cool little things you can do with this card to increase your chances of getting to draw extra cards and make him into a little beater.
Yeah. And now talk a little bit more about expanding White's color pie into drawing cards, because that's obviously been a community topic as of late, and we've started seeing more cards of that nature on the wild. How are you exploring that space right
now? Yeah, I mean, it was something the community had brought up over and over again. I think Commander players kind of were at the forefront of that discussion, rightfully so, because when you're kind of stuck playing certain colors depending on what you pick, and shortcomings like my color can't draw cards are really evident in that format more than others. But we found that just about every format would benefit from a few white cards to let players draw. It's a card game. All your resources are cards, and so denying one color access to that resource was just too much to bear. We need every color to kind of have a flow of stuff. Keep the juice coming throughout the course of the game. Now it's cool when we can do it in ways that make the colors feel different. Blue will continue to just draw large numbers of cards. Black often will trade life for cards or sacrifice things to draw cards. Red kind of does this impulsive draw that you've seen on a bunch of different Chandras and other cards where you have to use the cards within a short period of time. Green usually draws as a result of creatures. And then we decided white could either draw from, either taxing your opponent to draw, or, kind of a more patient style of draw where you can get a steady trickle of extra resources as opposed to a flood of them. And there's just, Arinia is the white member of the Color Pie Council, and she has been digging in really hard on different designs that are going to spark our imagination as designers and people leading sets to see what we like and what can stick. And you've seen a few of them show up from time to time in sets recently, and there's even more in the pipeline now. I know Gavin's made some videos about it, so something we've been looking at for like the past year and a half, I'd say. And this is just another example of a card like that.
Okay. Speaking of white and giving it a little boost, our next card certainly does that. So this is the white card of the Elemental Incarnation cycle. As Aaron was pointing out before, as everyone guessed, it does gain life, but not in the way you might expect.
The white one is the life gain spell.
It is the life gain spell.
It is.
Yeah, let me read it real quick. It is Solitude for 3 and 2 white. It is a creature elemental incarnation. It has flash and lifelink. And when Solitude enters the battlefield, exile up to one other target creature. That creature's controller gains life equal to its power. It has an evoke cost of exile a white card from your hand. Chat's picking up where this is coming from. Aaron, tell us a little bit about Solitude.
Yeah, we can get the next slide up. Yeah, that's where it came from. So this cycle, when I first signed on to lead this set, Eric Lauer, one of our other set leads, came to me and said, "Hey, I heard you're leading the next modern set. I have an idea for a cycle. It's creatures, but they, are pitch spells with evoke of exiling a card from your hand." And he said, "Imagine like a white one that was swords to plowshares on a body." And I was like, "Okay, type that in right away. That sounds super cool." And that was the, that exact conversation was the genesis of the rest of this cycle. All of the rest of them changed a whole bunch of times what they did, what their effects were when you evoked them. But the white one had just kind of stuck as exactly that. It was like the picture perfect example of what we wanted this cycle to be. The numbers changed a lot. It took a lot of work from our play testers to figure out, should this be cost 5 or 4, or how big should it be. Flash was talked about. It's cool that it has flash, so you can basically, even if you're tapped out and your opponent tries to, combo you off with Ivy Lane Denizen or whatever is going to happen in the future, you can respond with an evoked Solitude. And yeah, Swords to Plowshare is obviously like the benchmark white removal spell. And we weren't quite ready to add that to modern yet, that exact card, but this was a cool way to give access to that effect, and make a sweet new, ETB creature that, you can do all the same ephemerate tricks, blink it, whatever, reanimate it, that you can do with the rest of the cycle. And it has a really powerful comes into play effect that should see play across many formats. So I hope the white fans out there are not disappointed with this one, because I was excited about it from the moment I heard the idea from Eric.
Great. And then, yeah, for those of you keeping track at home, I think we still have yet to reveal the red and green elemental incarnations are not yet public. So the black one, Grief, the blue one, Subtlety, And then now we have Solitude.
So yeah,
All
how long
right.
are
So,
previews running? We should have the whole set out by what, middle of next week, something like that.
early next week. Yep.
Okay, so
Early
yeah,
next
they'll be
week.
coming soon.
That they will. All right. Next up, we will recap these and again save your questions for the end. We actually have a whole bunch of reprints to talk through, so we're gonna move on to reprints. The next one is a card that it's ubiquitous in Commander to the point that I didn't realize it wasn't in Modern, but it wasn't in Modern. Now it is in Modern. Let's put Nevinyrral's Disc up on the screen. Nevinyrral's Disc is a 4-mana artifact that enters the battlefield tapped, and 1 and tap it, destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Yeah, Aaron, this wasn't in Modern.
No, it's one of those cards that feels like it should have been. Um, there are several cards that do similar things. This one, because it's such an old school card from Alpha, actually, um, it specifically doesn't destroy planeswalkers. So there's some cool stuff you can do with it, keeping your planeswalkers around and destroying everything else. I also remember this showing up in like Legacy for a period of time with like the original Elspeth, and if you made the Elspeth emblem to give all your stuff indestructible, it gave the disc indestructible, which meant it didn't destroy itself, so you could just use it every turn. So there's some cool stuff that you can do with this for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. And now, Aaron, you've been a long time player. Did you play much with Disc in competitive setting back in the day?
Yeah, Necropotence decks that you could use the disc as a solid board wipe that could also get your Necro off the table.
Mm-hmm.
In case you had to kind of drain your life down to the point where you needed to start drawing cards normally. There are plenty of blue decks that use that card as well. So, yep, I have
The old
cast
Rainbow of Freed decks.
many nevs discs. Yep.
All right. Next up, we're going to do 2 MH1 reprints. So these are the reprints found only in collector boosters. So we're going to show off 2 of those. First up, another white card. We've got Ranger Captain of EOS. It's a 1 white for another human. This one's a soldier ranger as well. It's a 3/3, and when Ranger Captain of EOS enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Sacrifice Ranger Captain of EOS. Your opponents can't cast non-creature spells this turn. So, Aaron, let's talk a little bit about how you selected the MH1 cards to bring into this collector booster slot.
Sure. So, I mean, it's pretty simple. Um, the product architect, I think it was Mike Turian that was working on the set at the time, said, "Oh, cool, you're doing retro frames in MH2. That's sweet. Why don't we put some other MH1 cards in retro frame?" I know we had done Yawgmoth and maybe 1 or 2 others in Time Spiral Remastered, but there's still an appetite for a lot of the other cards from MH1 to have retro frames. So basically, I just was looking through deck lists and finding just about anything that was getting played anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and threw it on the list of cards that we could insert into collector boosters in the retro frame. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
notice on Ranger Captain that it has the creature type Ranger, which
Yeah.
is debuting in this set, kind of as a prelude to the upcoming D&D set. So Quirion Ranger now is a Ranger. This is now a Ranger, and you'll see an Oracle update when this set comes out. Anything with Ranger in its name will have Ranger added to its creature type.
Great. And this is, I'm seeing a bunch of questions about all this in chat. So I think, producer Sean, this is a good place to start throwing up the graphics about where you could get the different treatments. And we'll talk a little bit through that before we move on to the next preview card. So, yeah, retro frames of main set cards. Regular or foil can be found in draft and set boosters, and then collector boosters have regular foil or foil etched. Modern Horizons 1 retro frame, so like the Ranger Captain we just saw, only found in collector boosters in foil or foil etched. Next up, we've got the borderless, which can be found in anything. We've got the extended art rares, which are only in collector boosters. And then finally the sketch cards, which can be found in anything, and the retro frame fetch lands, which can also be found in any booster. So, Aaron, how did you determine where these went and which cards got which treatments?
Okay, so the two main things you're getting are that are new to this set are the sketch frames and the retro frames, and those are in every booster. I actually got some pre-release packs from the office a couple days ago and was building pre-release sealed decks, and yes, it's just a mix of normal looking cards, sketch cards, and retro cards all thrown together, which is cool. And there's also some of the borderless planeswalkers and some of the other
Mm-hmm.
mythics. You get those in every kind of booster, so those are very cool. The extended art rares is kind of always been a collector booster
Mm-hmm.
unique thing that only shows up there. So any rare that's not a sketch gets the extended art that's in collector boosters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we threw in some MH1 cards in the retro frames that are only in foil and foil etched into the collector boosters as well. So those cards are not really considered to be in Modern Horizons 2. They're not in the Modern Horizons 2 set per se. They don't have the Modern Horizons 2 expansion symbol. They are just MH1 cards, but we made cool versions of them and threw them in the collector boosters for MH2.
Mm-hmm.
And how I chose these, so usually with our showcase cards, there's some shtick like all the landfall cards are getting the Hedron frame, or all the mutate cards are getting the kind of comic book monster frame
Mm-hmm.
treatment. But here, it was really just pick of the litter. Like, which cards in the set feel old school to me? And just went
Yeah.
through and kind of highlighted all those and picked I don't even know how many there are, 40, 50 cards that feel the most like really old throwbacks or old characters or cards that would have been at home in, 90s
Mm-hmm.
Magic. And then went through the art file with the art directors and said which cards have sketches that are really distinct and look really cool, um, and make sketch cards out of those, because some of these artists, their sketches look like almost exactly the same as the final painting, maybe just with a smaller level of detail. I think we were
Mm-hmm.
going for more of like that, Mark Zug, or Kev Walker, like pencil sketch that you more think of traditionally. Like if you look at the Late to
Yeah.
Dinner sketch card, or the Dermo Taxi sketch card, that they look. That's what you think of when you hear sketch. So we look for cards that really hit that aesthetic because they looked really cool in that
Mm-hmm.
minimalistic sketch frame. So this was a weird set in that the showcase cards were just kind of hand selected one by one for whether I thought they were thematic fits for what we were trying to deliver. I think most sets
Mm-hmm.
will in the future will have the kind of easier to understand, all the blanks have the treatment, all the adventure cards have the treatment, etc.
Sure.
But
So this is
this
because
one,
Modern
because
Horizons.
this, yeah, it doesn't have like a
Yeah.
density of anything. There's one of this, two of that, three of that, so there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a group of cards that it was easy to wrap our arms around. So it was just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
you know pick the ones that would be cool. So I hope we picked the right ones.
All right. Well, here's one I know you picked correctly because chat has been asking for it repeatedly last week and this week. So let's show another one of those Modern Horizons retro frame cards. So there is
Boom.
Urza, Lord High Artificer, a 1/4 for 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue. Legendary creature, human artificer. When Urza, Lord High Artificer, enters the battlefield, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Tap an untapped artifact you control, add blue mana. 5, shuffle your library, then exile the top card. Until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. And I actually have one of those in the etched foil here in
Ooh,
real
lucky
life that
you.
I can kind of show off. Let's get that right up in there. I'll try to get that
Focus.
autofocus.
There
There
it
we
is. There it
go.
is. There.
Yeah, so you'll see that it gets the shooting star treatment from what we used to do with the old foils. Come on, focus. Anyway,
Yeah, so people have been asking, what does etched foil mean? I've seen that. I've seen that a lot. Um, you
yeah,
can
what
do it,
does etched
camera.
foil mean?
So etched foil. I think people, the delta between what etched foil meant in Commander Legends and then what it meant in the Strixhaven Mystical Archive was really huge, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of surprising. It has nothing to do with the physical design of the card or the layout of the card. What etched foil is the substrate of which the foil is applied to the card. So our normal foils, we call them rainbow foils, they have this like plastic layer, very thin plastic layer. That's the shiny part.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of, when we print, we knock out certain areas so that they're shiny. Um, Etched foil, it just applies this kind of thin metallic layer onto the card itself. There's no plastic layer in the middle of the card.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a very similar shiny effect. It has a slightly different veneer to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they look really cool. And on these
Yeah.
ones, as you saw with the Urza, like we put a ton of that metallic finish on them, so they look a lot like old foils.
Mm-hmm.
Strixhaven Mystical Archive, we put just a tiny bit of it on there. It was just kind of a highlight on some of the pin lines. But yeah, so we'll have both versions of the traditional foil and the etched foil of a lot of these cards in the collector boosters. So we'll be happy to get feedback on which ones you folks like better. This will be a good time to check them both out.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All
Urza,
right.
Urza, funny enough, Urza was in contention to be in Time Spiral remastered on the bonus sheet,
Okay.
but it was like the font they wanted to not use cards that had quite that many lines of text on them. Like that, the
It
font's
has
too
a
small.
lot of lines of text.
We don't want to do that here. Um, yeah, none of the Time Spiral remastered cards have that many lines of text on them. But when we got to this and it was like we're picking specifically MH1, it was like we're gonna have to break that rule because we can't do this without Urza. And so
Mm-hmm.
there he is. There he is.
Makes sense. All right. The next cards we have for preview are all part of a larger archetype. So, Aaron, why don't you start first by talking a little bit about how Modern Horizons can inject new life into archetypes that are maybe tier three, not quite viable in modern?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of ways we can try to get cards in the set to matter. I mean, we can obviously just make really good versions of base effects. Like if we made an awesome removal spell that's the best one of its type, then sure, just about every deck of that color will probably play some of them.
Mm-hmm.
We can give good decks um, another card or two, which is an easy way to make sure cards show up. But it's a little dangerous in that if the deck's already good, like we got to watch out making good decks even better. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and like the way I hope we do it is we throw out a bunch of stuff that could make completely new decks or take archetypes that are on the fringe and try to get them fully playable because they finally have the right amount of tools. And so with MH2, a couple that we really focused on. One was Reanimator because there isn't really a traditional Reanimator deck in Modern right now, so we decided to give it a few tools, as you've seen through some of the previews. And the other one that we're going to show cards from here now is Enchantress, which is a popular deck type that has existed in various different formats from time to time,
Mm-hmm.
and does not have the tools to compete in Modern right now. So we decided to throw some stuff at it and see if we can get people brewing.
Yeah. So we've got three stuffs to show off. The first one is Solitary Confinement, an enchantment for 2 and a white. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card, skip your draw step. You have Shroud and prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. So, Aaron, in the Enchantress archetype, where does Solitary Confinement fit in?
Well, the way Enchantress works, you have ways to draw lots of extra cards, usually by playing more and more enchantments. So you can pay for the upkeep of Solitary Confinement, and this, makes you unkillable basically while it's in play. Um, you can't be targeted, and you can't take damage. So as far as cards you want to have out while you're trying to dirtle around and go off with your cool card drawing deck, this is at the top of the list. This card's seen play from time to time in a whole bunch of different formats, whether it's with Squee or other Enchantress engines or whatnot. It's just other ways to make sure you have cards to discard to it. And so we thought that this was the time to bring it to Modern.
Hmm. All right. Next up, we have an enchantment that can go find your solitary confinement or protect it. Sterling Grove, green and a white. It's an enchantment that gives your other enchantments Shroud. Sacrifice Sterling Grove and pay a mana to search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it, then shuffle and put that card on top. Aaron, how important is this card to the Enchantress archetype?
It does a lot. I mean, it is an enchantment, so if you have enchantresses, it draws cards. It protects all the rest of your enchantments, such as your solitary confinement, so that it's hard for your opponent to get rid of. They have to get rid of this first, and then that, and then if you're missing pieces, you can pay mana, sacrifice this to go find them. So it's super utility, really popular card. This art is super cool. Steb McKinnon, obviously, we used it on Magic Online for a while. It was a judge promo. Just a amazing depiction of this card. And it's not in Modern. It was in Invasion block in the set Invasion, and did some cool stuff in formats where that set was legal for a while. But I think folks who like playing Enchantress type decks really dig this card.
Yeah, and you mentioned Invasion there, and I just want to take a moment to point out the watermark on the card. So what were you going for with the watermark on these new to Modern reprints?
So the first Modern Horizons had a bunch of, added some reprints to Modern, if you remember, like Mana War and Genesis and Lava Dart. So it had, cards that it was bringing in from pre-Modern and adding them into the format, and they were just kind of folded into the set, as every other card was. So if you didn't know or you hadn't heard of the card, um, you wouldn't really know that anything was different about it. And then we're excited to add these cards to Modern, but at the same time, if we reprint them and they do things like take up your rare slot, maybe Genesis isn't as exciting to you as some of the new stuff that was in MH1, or maybe the card Future Sight isn't that exciting to you. As your rare, it was kind of disappointing sometimes, but we wanted to add them to the format, and that was the way we had thought to do it then. So my thought was, kind of the same way Strixhaven did its Mystical Archive, where it had this dedicated slot in the booster for these reprints, we could do that here as well. So instead of a basic land, basically, you're going to get a reprint card that has a watermark like this on it to let you know this is a card that has existed before in Magic and that is getting added to Modern with this set. There is a rarity, so some of them are uncommon, some of them are rare, a few of them are mythic, and it's just kind of like a bonus extra card. Sometimes you get two rares. Actually, quite often you'll get two rares. A rare like Sterling Grove, and then a normal rare from the set. So the packs feel more powerful. It adds a whole other layer of stuff to do in limited, and in draft and sealed. And we think it's a cooler way to inject those cards in that make it feel like you're getting something extra as opposed to getting something that you might already own in your rare slot, for instance. And I love the watermark. Like we did that in
Yeah.
the A25
Masters 25, yeah.
Masters 25, like, as this retrospective on all of Magic. That set had a card from like every set that had ever existed, and I just love that visual as an indicator of like, here's your history lesson. This set came from Judgment, or this card came from Judgment, this card came from Invasion. So it's just a neat little thing that differentiates the cards visually, and tells you something cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, we haven't yet introduced the third of our trio of cards that are injecting Enchantress into Modern. And where would we be without an Enchantress? It is not Argothian Enchantress, sorry, Chad, but it is Enchantress's Presence, which is an enchantment for 2 and a green that just says whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Simple, straight to the point, and very, very good. So, Aaron, how does this fit into the Enchantress engine?
Well, this is the whole shebang right here. The whole goal of the Enchantress archetype is to chain enchantments together and draw cards with cards like Enchantress's Presence or any of the other creatures that have this effect as well. Like Eidolon of Blossoms. There was a Satyr in like M19. There's been a bunch of cards that Mesa Enchantress
Hmm.
that have this effect as well. So you want to and we debated this one versus Argothian Enchantress. I think as you see the rest of the set come together, you'll see why this one made more sense here. Um, but yeah, this is the bread and butter of the archetype for sure.
Hmm. All right. Well, and we've also recently revealed a bunch of cards. So it's not just these three cards that are injecting life into this Enchantress archetype, but we revealed a bunch of other enchantments at the same time too. Sean, can you put those up? Yeah, so talk about adding these cards to the set, Aaron.
Yeah, so a lot of these are here just for various other reasons, but they really allowed us to kind of seed help make sure Enchantress had the tools it needed to get off the ground in Modern, and also kind of give us that hidden extra archetype in Draft. The green white archetype in the set most visibly is around +1/+1 counters. But if you get some of these rares or specific build arounds, there are enchantments seeded throughout, as you can see at lower rarities. Soul Snare is an awesome example of a card like this where it's a good card. Uh, it can prevent you from being attacked or take out the biggest thing attacking you, but it's an instant enchantment. So if you have Enchantress's Presence out, you get to draw a card whenever you cast it. Um, the seals, I just like their gameplay in constructed. That you can preemptively play a removal spell or a disenchant effect if you're worried about your opponent making you discard it before they play their whatever it is they're trying to protect. Out of Time was just a cool one-off design. And Mirari's Wake's just been a popular card that is kind of like Disc, like one that people might even guess is in Modern, but it's not. And it has been fun to play and constructed at various points in time. So yeah, the tools are here um, throughout the set for both limited and constructed to try to make something happen with some of these Enchantress cards. So I hope people give it a go.
Yeah.
We certainly spent a
Now
lot of
you were
time playtesting internally.
I was going to say you were talking before the show about some tweaks that were made to Out of Time because it was too strong in the Enchantress archetype. How did that card look before?
Yeah, so let's see. Right now it untaps all creatures and phases them out. For a while it was not hitting tokens. For a while it was not hitting enchantment creatures. Um, and it was really easy to build decks that could leverage whatever it is that this didn't affect, like Enchantress decks that could just generate a ton of resources, create a board presence out of whatever was immune to Out of Time's phasing effect, play this and kill them, or kill them over the next couple of turns. So eventually we just kind of had to button it up and make sure it phased out everything, so that you're gonna have to come up with a little more creative ways to kill your opponent once you play one of these.
Hmm.
But it was potent. It was potent, and we think it's still
Okay.
in a good spot. The card is a very cheap board wipe.
Great. Well, so that is all the cards we're going to preview today. But you've got Aaron Forsythe here. He's going to answer some questions about Modern Horizons 2. So go ahead and start putting
Yeah.
them in the chat. I've already started writing down a few. And Aaron, we're going to go back a little bit to the discussion about the MH1 reprints and old border cards, because the
Yeah.
most popular question is why are they only in foil for this set? And second part of that question is could we see them in non-foil in the future?
Yeah. We were definitely leaning into the collector booster aspect of them. That was just a choice we made as to which versions to create and how many different versions to create. We thought the best thing to do was to create the two different foil versions and see what players thought of those. But absolutely, I think the the way the retro frames have gone over, both in Time Spiral and here, is making us believe that there's going to be other opportunities to do these in the future at various different points in time. So, um, yeah, I hear you. Um, I think we can actually figure out a way to create those cards in some other product going forward. And yep, point taken.
Great. So next up, I'm literally just copying and pasting questions, and we're just going to go through them in order, which means we might bounce around topics a little bit, but we'll get to as many as we can. We've got about 25 minutes. All right. Here's a question: did you know Grist Hungertide could be used as a commander during design, or was the rules committee announcement also a surprise to you? So, producer Sean, if you can put Grist up on the screen so we can look at it. It's a planeswalker, but the specific line of text that matters to this question is: as long as Grist the Hungertide isn't on the battlefield, it's a 1/1 insect creature in addition to its other types.
Yeah, that's a funny story. So in design, we definitely fell in love with this first line of text, and it had nothing to do with Commander. It was, we loved all the modern interactions of you can collect a company for this, you can ether vial this out, you can um, raise dead it or grave digger for it or whatever. Like all the things that creature cards let you do that you normally wouldn't be able to do with a planeswalker. It can't be force of negation, it can't be spell pierced. There's all these really cool interactions. Um, the question came up, okay, well, if that's all true, as we were developing it for modern and playtesting, doesn't this work in Commander then as well? Because it would be a creature in your command zone. And we asked our rules manager at the time, and he said, I don't think that works. And we said, okay, no big deal. And we told the Commander Rules Committee, do you have any strong opinions on this? Because we don't think it works. And they said, no, that's fine. And we thought that was the end of the story. As we get later in design and we start doing our kind of large group reviews of the card set where we're showing it to more and more people in the company to get reactions and final feedback on stuff, like every single person that saw this card was like, awesome, I can't wait to use this as my commander. Like it must have heard it 20 or 30 times, in the course of 2 weeks. And it's just like, oh God, well, that was not the plan. We kind of told them that's not how it's going to work. But let's take another crack at it, because as a designer, and a rules nerd, and the direct, the lead of the whole R&D team, I really like it when our game is intuitive. And if you read something and think it should be true, and everyone reads it and thinks it should be true, we should do our best to make sure that it is true. And in this case, I don't think anyone without like super, super deep rules knowledge would have ever guessed that this could not have been your commander. It just reads like exactly like it should be my commander. It's a creature when it's not in play. So we took another crack at the rules. It only took a tiny little change. I appreciate that the CRC was accommodating to that. We kind of hit them up with it late and said we would like to kind of change our minds here if you guys think that's okay, because every single person we showed this to wants it to work a certain way. Is that okay? And we talked about it back and forth for a little while and came to agreement. Yeah, yep, let's do that. It's such a weird card. I don't think it's really going to be a precedent for very much. It's certainly not making all planeswalkers your commander. But little tiny rules tweak under the hood. Most people won't even think twice about it, and now it could be your commander. And that's how that went down.
All right. We had another question: was Gaia, the character, the goddess in green, considered for the
Yep.
set?
I don't think to the point of actually ending up on a card. I know Ethan Fleischer in Vision just has this giant list of old lore characters that someday should be made into cards. And Gaia's name is on that. He went through and picked the ones he wanted to use, many of which ended up in the final product. I don't think Gaia ended up there, but that sounds like a great character to try to figure out how to. She's a super powerful, so it'll be, really out there card. But yeah, someday, but
Mhm.
unfortunately not here.
Would we ever do retro frame planeswalkers?
We have talked about it. There isn't. I mean, what I like about the retro frame is that we can map things that were look pretty real in that frame,
Hmm.
which is why like you're not seeing um, like a hybrid card in the retro frame because those just weren't things from back then. Planeswalkers to me are in that bucket of like this whatever we do here, it's not going to look like anything you actually experienced back in the day. Um, I've seen some mock-ups of people trying them both internally and externally. So I won't say never, but they're not here, and I think they're going to be pretty jarring. Whatever solution we come to for how they should look in the old frame.
Okay. I think you talked a little bit about this earlier, but I'll ask it anyway. Could you explain your thinking behind adding 5 free spell incarnations? Was it to temper the power of the London Mulligan? How is it good for the format?
Well, generally we like adding reactive cards to the format, making sure the format has strong reactive cards to make sure things don't get broken. So, like a Swords to Plowshares, we talked, as I kind of joked when we debuted the card, there are plenty of 2-card infinite creature combos. Having a way to stop those even when you're tapped out will allow those combos to continue to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the free spells are that. I think Grief, after many weeks of playtesting, ended up one that was kind of the proactive one. So it stands out in that your opponent hasn't done anything wrong yet. Why do you get to unmask them or whatever? Um, but that was just the ability that we felt had the right impact on the metagame as we understood it at the time we were developing. So I wouldn't take Grief as kind of the impetus for this cycle. In general, we're happier with the kind of counter spells, removal spells, things like that, and you'll see that as the other two come out, they kind of fit more into that bucket. Um, and I think that's just healthy for an environment to have. As the environment gets faster, the answers need to get faster, and they are card disadvantage whenever you need to use them like that. So there is definitely a cost to free spells, but that was the impetus for the cycle.
Okay. We've seen a couple variations of this question. So we've seen several cards that are very good against colorless and Tron decks. Will we see something that is for colorless or Tron decks?
Um, I mean, there are colorless cards in the set. There's at least one pretty expensive one that I don't think we've shown off yet. So um, there will be options for you to check out and see if you like them in your Tron decks for sure. Um, but like on the hierarchy of archetypes that need more stuff versus archetypes that need more answers against them, Tron was kind of at the top, near the top of the list of like stuff we need to make sure that there are better answers for as opposed to better tools for. So yeah, if
Mm-hmm.
you see the scale is kind of tipped a little bit against that archetype in this set, that's because that's where they were in the positioning when we were figuring out where to put power.
All right. Next question. Do you think dedicated reprint slots is something you'll do more often now?
Um, well, we did it kind of back to back sets here. It's not something that you're going to see um, in another product the rest of this year, for instance. But I think we've all liked how they've played out. Um, it's a fun way to, I was a big fan of the time shifted cheat and time spiral just because of the extra depth it gave to the format, and just like your booster packs just had all sorts of nifty little surprises in them. So I love that, and I love that it's a way to get reprints out there while still fitting them together with the new stuff that we're making. So yeah, I think they're going to catch on internally, and it'll be something that we will discuss just about every time. Like, is this a good set to do this? Is this a good set to do this? And hopefully we'll do it some more.
Cool. Next question. I think this is not a Magic question. Pretty sure it's not, because I know you're a fan of this team. Dear Aaron, I'm a Pirates fan. Why do I do this to myself? I don't think he's talking about the creature type.
No. I don't know. That's the nature of sports, right? Like, there's something in your identity that you attach yourself to this entity that continues to let you down over and over again because next year you think it's going to be better. There's this clip going around now from today's game. I think 5 or 6 people have sent to me. This awful play that their
Oh, that was the Pirates. Yeah, I saw
rookie
that.
first baseman made that led a run score with 2 outs, and it was just a disaster, like joke, ridiculous. And that's kind of the Pirates for you. God bless you. I'm a Pirates and Mariners fan, so I just signed myself up for like 100 games of heartbreak every year. It's tough, but
I mean,
that's
I'm from
sports to
Minnesota. We have no teams that ever take that back. Our women's basketball team is in the WNBA is good.
Hey, the
The
Twins made
Lynx.
the playoffs recently. They're not good this year, but
Every time we make the playoffs, it's only to lose to the Yankees in the first round. It's
yeah,
just
I hear
I'd
you.
rather not make the playoffs. Like, why do that? Anyway, hey Aaron, what was it like to lose to Brad Nelson in lunchtime team drafts?
Oh, hey, Brad. It was pretty infuriating. I don't remember. We were drafted. This was like Guilds of Ravnica or something like that. I think that's the set that was out at the time. We were working on this set together, and I don't know. He had some deck that was pretty infuriating, and it went the whole nine. We took it was 3 games, and it was like we were the last match. It was evenly matched team draft, and he got me in the last one. Was pretty dejected. Not gonna lie.
All right, so we've had variations on the same question, and this may take a little bit. I think it's asked 2 different ways, so I'm going to ask both versions of the question that I've seen. Make sure I have the wording on both. Okay. The first way it was asked was, what does a healthy modern look like to you? Can we get a renewed mission statement? And then also, Aaron just said things are getting faster. Why is that okay? At what point will it not be okay? And what will you do?
Yeah, I think we can put together some kind of mission statement. I mean, in general, a healthy format involves a certain speed of which average games take. Modern, I think, we still hope turn 4 is kind of that key point in modern where games aren't decided before then. Variety of decks and just general play experience. I mean, there can be a lot of different decks and they're all not fun. We don't want that. There can be um, a variety of different decks, but most of them are bad and lose to whatever the best 1 or 2 decks are. We don't want that. There can be a variety of different decks that all kill you on the second turn of the game. We don't want that. That said, every time we add new cards to a format, it is almost necessarily making the format a little bit faster every single time. Like eventually there's going to be a 1 mana cheaper version of something that didn't exist before. And it's just that happens. It kind of erodes the turns away from the format. And unless we can make cards that really gum games up, it will just continue to get faster and faster, and we need to make sure that there are tools to fight against that. So, I mean, when does it get too fast? I don't know. I still think Legacy's in a pretty decent spot, despite having all the same very fast cards and tons of 1 mana spells mattering, and can make 20/20s on turn 2 or whatever. So I think there are ways to keep the format fun and healthy, even if that critical turn number kind of notches back one. But I will definitely talk with Ian Duke and Andrew Brown and the other play designers about trying to codify some of this into something that can explain the format. Because yeah, we did that a while ago. I think it's healthy for us to take stock of things that way. And sure, we can try to get an article together probably by the end of the year.
Cool. Next question. You mentioned Enchantress and Reanimator. Can you talk about some other archetypes that you wanted to support?
Well, I don't have it memorized off the top of my head what's out there and what's not. I mean, Merfolk was one that we threw a couple of cards at,
Mm-hmm.
including a mythic god, which is pretty sweet.
Yep.
And we hope that that moves the needle on that deck. Like Squirrels was one that we had to kind of build from nothing. I don't think we ended up with like any sort of thing close to a tier 1 constructed deck. Although I was listening to the Bash Brothers podcast today that Corey Baumeister and had Brian Brondu in on, and he worked here for a while on the set, and he was talking about he remembers a point in time where Squirrels was the best deck in the modern FFL. Like it was crushing everything. We had to tone it down from there, but trying to get that deck into at least a fun competitive spot. And then let's see what else. Madness. There's a couple cool tools for that. A lot of other stuff is just single individual cards, like something like General Ferris Rokirik, which we hope might make some kind of cool multicolor deck. Brad Nelson previewed to Territorial Kavu, which we
Mm-hmm.
hope can make Domain Zoo. Something again, we put a bunch of modular cards in the set that, maybe can kickstart and put Arcbound Ravager back into people's deck lists. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to spell it all out. I'd much rather people cook on their own and see what emerges from this vast craziness that we have created here. But yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff we were hoping to inject a little bit of interest and power into when we were putting the set together.
All right. Next question. I really like phasing as a tool in white. Will we see phasing used more going forward?
Yes, although we had plans of using it like a lot when we first put it on the Teferi and M21. We said, okay, we're going to use this word here, and we think it opens the door for us to use it a lot more. But as we develop with it and playtest with it in the premiere sets, there's still a lot of tricky rule stuff that even we isn't intuitive and that we're getting wrong. So there's places for it. It's not going to be quite the catch-all answer we had thought when we first brought it back. But if we deploy it carefully, I think there are spots where it can really add a cool dimension to the game. As you saw Out of Time in this set, and there will be a card here and a card there in some of the other sets coming out. So yeah, definitely a cool keyword. Still has some counterintuitive rules stuff going on that, if you ask different people, you get different answers of what they think should happen, which is not a great place to be for a game mechanic. But we'll use it where we can.
Makes sense. We'll make sure we get to that question. Were Brad Nelson and Samuel Black the best playtesters of all time? I love that question leaves out DVD, but
Brian,
it's also there. Yeah. How
they
was
were
it?
really good.
Talk a little bit
They
about
were
having
really
those three in.
I thought it was super fun. Like it went, as well or better as could be expected. Like they showed up. I don't even think they knew what they were in for. We showed them the card file. They were like super wide-eyed and really loving on what they were seeing, and then they dove in really hard and were immediately like, we can't print this, we can't print this, this is ridiculous, this is ridiculous. And they were right. Like I tend to cost things initially to make sure you play them. Like this card is pushed beyond sanity to make sure it ends up in people's decks so that we can find out where the line is.
Hmm.
I think that kind of was a little jarring for them. Like, did you really think this was okay? And it's kind of like, no, I didn't. I thought this is close to where it should be, and then we have to figure out where that goes. Um, but yeah, they were smart. They tackled the problems. They came up with great suggestions, which is always important for playtesters. You know, not just pointing out the problems, but like suggesting what it's going to do, what we need to change to make it do the things we want. We had to come up with some new cards. Like we had to kick a planeswalker out of the set and come up with a totally new one late in the process, and they were really useful for that. So you know, I hope they enjoyed it because I certainly enjoyed having that dedicated resource. Really smart, you know, kind of cutting edge. Knew what was going on in the real modern format and could apply that to helping us make the cards better. So it
Hmm.
was really fun, and I hope we can do something like in the future.
All right. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I might skip around a bit on some of these questions. This is an important one. Is this set print to demand?
Oh yeah. Um, yes, if we will keep taking reorders from retailers and distributors and print as much as people want us to keep making. That said, you know, printers take time. It's not going to be instantaneous. There might be points where it's all sold out, and there'll be more coming. But it's definitely not something we're trying to throttle the supply of by any means.
Hmm.
We know people need these cards for competitive Magic. That's important. We're opening back up. We're hoping to run real in-person tournaments soon, and we don't want I could not get any of the cards from my deck to be a thing. So yeah, let's make sure that we're going to make sure there's plenty of this out there for a long time.
Yep. And we to the thing you just mentioned, I have seen a bunch of questions about when is in-person play returning, and that's not really the topic of this stream. But as Aaron indicated, we're just as eager as you are to get back to that, and so it's opened up in some regions. The United States opens up tomorrow, for example. You know, except in areas where it's not. But
Yeah, and it's still like up to the stores and the local
mhm.
governments. And there's a lot of like I went to the store near me and said, "Hey, you guys running in-person stuff for MH2 pre-release?" And they said, "No, we're still being cautious." So you know,
Mhm.
it's you know we aren't going to dictate that people run events when they don't feel
Yep.
safe for their local go. So you're going to have to just check in with your own store, your own local governments and whatnot. But we are as itching to get back to it as you are for sure.
Yep. I've seen this next question asked a bunch of different ways, so I'm just going to say generally, can you talk a little bit about the token creation from Garth One Eye? And we can put Garth up on the screen, I think.
Oh yeah, I was anticipating this one actually. This is yeah. So Garth, totally bananas new kind of card that is creating copies of things that aren't anywhere else in the game at the moment. Um, as I like to say, he's kind of using Oracle as a lookup table. Go find the card named Disenchant and create an object, create a spell that does what that does, and let me cast it. Never done this before in Magic. That said, I've been trying to do this in Magic for a long, long time. So I had Sean pull some cards. Um, so Land of War Mentor. This is the Time Spiral Remastered version, but this was part of a cycle back in Future Sight, which is I don't even remember how many years ago at this point.
So many.
Um, but you know, I was working with Rosewater on working on this cycle of cards back then. I wanted it to say, you know, G tap, discard a card, create a copy of Llanowar Elves. And do exactly kind of what Garth One Eye is doing. Just say like the game knows what Llanowar Elves is. Make a copy of that. But there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, first of all, like back then, I don't think everyone had is ease of access to information. Everyone didn't have a phone in their pocket back then, which was a big deal. But at the same time, there were rules implications because stuff like expansion symbol was a copyable characteristic. Like which version of Land of War Elves is it making a fourth edition Land of War Elves, or is it making a beta? Like that was an actual thing that would have had to have been solved if we wanted to do it that way back then. Since then, we've changed it so that expansion symbol is no longer a copyable characteristic. Yada yada yada. Anyway, you can see as we got to the mystery booster playtest cards, one of the few cards I contributed to that was this Tybalt the Chaotic, which does exactly this, right? Create cards out of thin air and cast one of them. And these cards, this list of cards, you really need to look these up. No one can tell you what these 9 cards do. And the reaction to this was generally pretty good. Like, people thought this was super fun and wanted to know if we would ever do anything like this, quote, for real. So then that led me to try this as a solution for Garth One Eye, which was a card we had like tried a whole bunch of different versions of, and Ethan wanted to have a character that casts spells specifically from alpha and beta. We tried a whole bunch of other designs that weren't satisfying. We landed on this one. So this makes a copy of Black Lotus or Shivan Dragon, and when you cast that copy, they enter the battlefield as a token copy of Black Lotus or a token copy of Shivan Dragon. And under our token philosophy that we've had forever, we don't print tokens that are copies of cards. Like, we did not make a printed token for Pack Rat. We did not make a printed token for whatever, if a card makes a copy, like Rite of Replication or
There's an
whatever.
ooze in this set. Yeah.
Right, Ave, the progenitor ooze with Storm and makes copies of itself. Like, we didn't print a token copy of that because those copies have mana costs and they look a lot like cards, and they're just very confusing physical objects. I think there's an argument to be made. Maybe they're not. Maybe we should change that rule. I'm open to having that discussion with our editors again, but that was just the philosophy we had, and we stuck to that philosophy here, and that's why there is no Black Lotus token in the set and no Shivan Dragon token in the set. Now, obviously, people are clamoring for a Black Lotus token in particular. I don't think it has much to do with using Garth One Eye. So I don't. That's not why we made the card, was to be able to create a bunch of pseudo realistic looking Black Lotus tokens. That was not the point of the design at all. It was just to be a cool throwback that gave you a little taste and let you create a Black Lotus. If you've never done that before, it's really fun. So this was not a specific decision around this card. We may revisit the policy, but that is the story of why there are no Black Lotus tokens in the set, and they're probably unlikely to have ever been. It was not a decision about this card in particular.
We are over time, so I've got a whole list of questions that we didn't quite get to. So I apologize to everyone who put a question in chat and we didn't quite get to it. I see you. They were good questions. If we had another hour, we could probably keep talking. I do want to say, just on Garth, just because it's my favorite card in the set, because the book Arena is, I've got it actually right here.
Oh, yeah.
It is. Arena. My favorite Magic book that we've ever made, which I learned during MH2 prep that it's actually, I thought it wasn't canon because its take on Magic is different, and planeswalking, it's all a little different. But I was informed that it is, and it takes place on Dominaria, and it's a little hand wavy in places, but yeah. So the flavor for this Garth One Eye is that he actually casts these spells in the book, and so I know Ethan made a long list of spells he cast in the book and then selected from them for this card.
Yeah. The printed not exactly to the book. We had to change some just to make sure that the gameplay was better. But right, he was like, in the book, he is very literally like casting Magic cards. They're not cards, but they're named spells that mimic what they would do in the game, and that was a big point of what the design was trying to do. Make sure Garth One Eye like casts things that feel like old Magic cards. So I think we succeeded on that angle.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Aaron, for sharing all of that knowledge with us and answering all those questions. We will be back next week with Brad Nelson and Sam Black. We're going to share some of their stories from Modern Horizons 2. The full set will be out by that time, so we'll kind of unleash them to talk about all the things that they learned and
all the dirty little secrets.
All the dirty little secrets. Brad actually has an article up on Star City Games today that is free and has his preview card in it that talks a little bit about the process behind the scenes, but we'll dive into it next week as well. In the meantime, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.